James for the introduction. Thank you for all for coming to this lunch session. I would like to, before I present, I would like to introduce my colleagues here. Carl Zinnes, who is our head of Boston, New York operations, and also Matt. He's our engagement manager for the Fidelity account. And Jun Wu, he's vice president for our enterprise IT service operations. And Jun is based in China. He came over to attend this session. And so Carl and myself will be presenting together. So I'll do some introduction of China's IT industry, and then Carl will talk about China. Whether China is the right choice for you. Then I'll do some talk a little bit about our company. Then we'll do a question and answer session. I am sure you have a lot of questions about China. Before we start, I'd like to do a quick survey. You see, how many of you have been to China? Okay, I guess most of you have been to China. How many of you are familiar with outsourcing industry in China? Okay. So I guess not too many people are familiar with the industry. So that's hopefully the information we present here will help you understand more. And I would like to have this session more interactive, so feel free to stop me or Carl if you have questions instead of we do the Q&A at the end. Okay. So just a quick review of the industry. It's probably too small for the folks in the back. This is how this IT outsourcing industry started, I think, in the mid-90s. It started with some Indian companies that are doing work here in the U.S. and Y2K made this outsourcing a big business. And after Y2K, several Indian companies that started to do offshoring, invented this offshore global delivery model. And since then, it becomes a major trend and developed into a global business. And China came to this industry in late 90s and early 2000. It became aware of this industry and started to join this industry. And then there are many other companies started to get involved worldwide in many different countries. And in the 2000 to 2005, Indian companies are become well established and matured methodologies, matured delivery models, and enhanced their service offerings. And China has also started to become more involved in this industry. And over the next 5 years from 2005 to 2010, China has seen a lot of growth in this industry and started to get involved in delivering services in U.S. and Europe. China started with Japan and then expanded into the delivering services in the world, in the U.S. and European market. So the industry, got started in mid-90s and developed until today. And so this is, shows you how, more specifically on China's IT service industry developed. I divided the past 15 years into 5-year segment, as we can see more clearly how the industry are evolving, have been evolved. starting from 2000 to 2004, that's the emerging period of time. Chinese companies and government were inspired by the Indian experience. They saw their big, good business opportunities, and there are demands from Japanese companies initially to leverage resources in China. And the government saw the opportunities, some companies saw the opportunities. So at that stage, I would characterize the development of the industry like a self-motivated. It's more of a, sort of a family business. There are many small companies in China, software companies or system integration companies start to get involved. They all claim themselves to be this, service outsourcing companies. But in reality, they're just doing one project here, one project there. It's more opportunistic. Then, starting in 2005, the venture capital companies started to get involved in this industry in China. They saw the opportunities, the potential, business opportunities that in this industry, because Indian has proven this model works. Offshoring, outsourcing works, and China is untapped, place. China has a lot of resources and has the big potential to provide similar services. So the venture capital companies got involved. They start to invest in companies, in the selected companies. And also Chinese government start to get involved here. Also, they started to provide policies, encourage companies to provide IT service, to take projects from global companies. So you see a significant growth from 2005 to 2010. Our company, iSoftStone, also benefited from this. We started in 2001, and in 2005, we got our first round of venture funding. That got us really in a fast growth, trajectory. With that funding, we started to consolidate, because the company at the time are all very small, a few hundred people, are large company, 500 people are a large company at the time. So with the funding, we were able to consolidate, acquire companies that will continue to increase our size. So size increase at the time was the top priority for all these companies to become legitimate, who can take on the projects that our global customers are looking to do. So the companies started to penetrate the US and European market, to work with the companies, especially those global companies that have local operations in China. So the initial engagement started in China with the multinational company's local branch. Then, further expand into their home country, home market. So there's a tremendous growth here. So I would characterize that period as organized. The companies start to organize together to become bigger, to have a process in place. A lot of companies obtain, CMM certification or assessment, getting into a more organized, growth phase. And in the next 5 years, from 2011 to 2015, I would say, you will see a new growth from those Chinese companies. And here during late 2009, 2010, a number of Chinese companies went public in U.S. And we are one of them. We went public in New York in December 2010. So you've seen companies that become mature, more professional. And so the next 5 years, the companies will continue to grow, to play more significant roles in a regional sense, in Asia Pacific as a regional player, but getting into the global marketplace. And many of those companies have a presence in the U.S. and Europe. We have our presence here in Boston, New York, and we also have presence in the Seattle, in the West Coast. So we're expanding into the global marketplace. So you will see more and more companies that are providing services directly to the customer base here. And then going forward, you will see the real global players, providers out of China. So right now, I would say we're still pretty much a regional provider. We have a global footprint, but we're pretty much a regional player. But I think in the years to come, we want to become a global player. Okay, so I characterize that the future is more professionalized. Now, just like IBM, like Infosys, these major players, we're catching up pretty fast. Any questions? I just want to pause for a few seconds. Yeah.
I have a quick one. Considering the inflation of Chinese wages, what kind of runway do you expect in terms of the pure cost arbitrage play? How long is this going to be a viable solution for clients in Western Europe or in the US, in your opinion?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I think we have some slides later on that will talk about this. But essentially, as you can see here, cost arbitrage is a typical competitive weapon Chinese company used in the past 5 years. Now we're really moving away from the cost arbitrage play. We're getting into more of a competence core capability. We want to become a more value-add player rather than just a cost savings. But later on, we'll talk more about this cost issue, inflation. Okay, just from a different perspective to look at the IT industry in China. We talk about we're a latecomer to the IT services, but the industry in China is actually pretty sizable. As you can see here, the total IT industry is about $212 billion business. It's just to give you a comparison, India's IT as a whole is about $107 billion. So the IT industry is actually, as a whole, is bigger in China. But when you look at the IT services, then China is much smaller. India has a much developed IT services industry. And if you look at the global, we call it IT export, this is more of an offshoring business, working the services provided to the international customer base, then China became even smaller. So this is, I think, the current status is really China's IT industry is sizable and it's growing very fast. IDC did a study, last year. Their projection is the IT industry will grow at about 25%, as a whole in China. And the IT service in China is also going to grow at over 20%. So it's a fast-growing industry, but it's relatively small still in terms of IT services. And this is where I think a lot of efforts are going into the government now make IT service one of the key industries they're going to support in the next 5-year plan. As you probably know, China has now developed, the government have a 5-year plan. For every 5 years, they will adjust their investment priorities. And now in the next one, the 12th 5-year plan, service industry is the key. And IT service is a key component of that service transformation. Chinese economy now is transforming from a manufacturing economy into a service-oriented economy. And IT service is a big part of that. So there's a major investment will go into this industry to continue to support its growth. And just to give you an idea of how the industry is developing in China, and this is a map put together by KPMG. And so you can see a lot of companies are setting up their delivery centers in China. It's very small, but if you look at it closely, all the major companies have their development center in China, either captive or through a third party. So it's all over the China, East Coast here, also into, the inland China. They continue to expand. And, one of the key reasons is the resource supply in China. There's a large amount of resource, college graduates in China that are underutilized. 6 million a year college graduates, and over half of those graduates are engineering graduates. So there's a big supply of resources in China that can be leveraged by this industry. Okay, as I mentioned, many of the major players are in China. So all the big names are in China, from the, IBM, Accenture, Capgemini, CSC, they all have operations in China. And IBM has the largest presence in China. I think they have over 10,000 people, in China. And then all the major Indian providers are also in China. Wipro, Cognizant, Infosys, TCS, HCL, they all have their own operations in China, multiple locations. And then these are the major leading Chinese providers. You probably heard of Vansinfo, iSoft. They are all New York listed, U.S. listed companies. And then there are smaller ones that are, set up by a foreign entity or foreign investor in China. These are the smaller ones. So it's pretty crowded right now over there. All the companies wants to really leverage China, the resource and also the market itself. Okay. So I'll turn to Carl for the next session, to talk about why China. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So what I really want to take you through today is some studies and some personal experiences to give you a flavor of the state of China outsourcing and where it stands today. In some respects, in terms of its own maturity, and then in other respects, in terms of how it fares against the rest of the marketplace. So when you look at the drivers of growth in the China marketplace, we've really come up with three main drivers. The first being risk diversification. Outsourcing in the U.S. especially, it's very mature. We're accustomed to doing it. India has been kind of one of the primary outsourcers for the U.S. for a period of time. But along comes, Brazil, Russia, and China, and certainly the Philippines and others. So when we talk to our clients, a lot of them really speak in terms of diversifying their risk. Us, iSoftStone in particular, our clients are predominantly Fortune 500 type clients, multinational clients, and they look at their business globally and how can they diversify their risk, how can they get more access, things like that. So that has accounted for a pretty significant portion of the growth driver of business in China for us. Secondly, and I think this one is really the most compelling, support market expansion because of the types of clients that we support, multinational retailers, automotive, manufacturers, financial services, et cetera. All those companies want to be a part of the growth in China, the expansion in China, and they look at outsourcing as kind of a foot in the door, way to step across the border, establish a practice, look at their business, and try to find ways to sell to that growing middle class, which exists in China. So that has been very much compelling. And as John mentioned, the talent pool with 6 million graduates per year, many of those engineering students, that's something that our clients are really looking to leverage. So when you take those three kind of drivers, it becomes very compelling for our clients to look at China. There are some in the early stages, labor arbitrage was a very significant part of the reasoning, the rationale for our clients wanting to go to China. We're finding it kind of stepping down a bit as our services are maturing, similar to, India and other outsourcers, we're developing more value-oriented services, and that has stepped down a bit as well. And so you can see with that, the growth that we've experienced from this study, 2007 to 2010, China has actually grown pretty significantly in its in the ability to attract the business and retain that business. The question?
You talk a little bit about what other geographies besides India your clients consider.
So my personal experience, India is the number one. I'd say second to that, and I'd have to think about how I'd rank them. We've seen Eastern European outsourcers come in. We've seen, I've worked with Mexico-based outsourcing. I haven't personally worked with Brazil-based outsourcing companies. And then I think Philippines as well. John, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think China has been ranked number 2 in many of the studies as a destination, and it's also the most, I think, favored among the BRIC countries for U.S. customers and European customers. China has been, the second, other than India, the second destination. And so I just want to add that.
Thank you. Great. So the next couple of slides will give you a perspective in terms of the maturity of the state of outsourcing in China. This first one was developed by KPMG, and it gives you kind of a Consumer Reports view of the maturity of the services. And it's probably hard to read, so I'll try to narrate as best I can. It's broken into 2 columns, the ITO services and the BPO services. And the darker the circle is, the more mature the offering is. Okay, so kind of with that as a backdrop, at first glance, you can see that the ITO services are somewhat mature and more mature than the BPO services. But, then again, China ranks higher in some areas than others, as would all. So this is kind of the China report card, if you will. But scoring best in China are software development and IT software training. So kind of considered to be mature offerings and something that is executed really well in China. Moderately mature are things like software product support, application management, application implementation, integrated circuit testing, kind of more on the engineering side, software testing, and other IT training. So you can see somewhat mature, good track record. I think it's more mature just because of the kind of the maturation of the market, the way that projects enter China. They come in as typically IT or other projects. We get good at those projects, and then you can kind of mature your offerings around that, and then that leads to other things like BPO, for example. So with BPO, BPO is broad, right? We think about BPO. It could be financial, it could be call center, it could be any number of things. But these were specifically ranked by KPMG. Ranking really high was recruitment, and I think that's in a number of ways recruitment within China for the skills and resources within the geography itself, and then also kind of the follow the sun BPO recruitment. How do I recruit resources? It's a 12-hour time zone difference, so I can kind of leverage BPO in China to do something different that maybe I can't do here or in India or somewhere else. More moderately mature are things like ARAP, financial, procurement, HR training. So training kind of takes on a certain maturity within China. Then less mature are things like direct material procurement, financial and accounting planning, so kind of less the execution, more the planning, risk management, and customer and sales management. So those are less mature within China. So as you can see, as the services are delivered as projects, BPO services are developed around that, and then over time they mature. And the expectation is, over the next 3 to 5 years that, these circles darken and you'll see more BPO offerings happening in China as well.
Right. Also, I would like to say that this is average for the industry for all the companies they surveyed. But if you want to go to China, you want to really select the partners. I would say there's some leading companies that has much higher maturity along all these service offerings. So it's critical for you to look at the partners, providers you want to select. I think the first-tier suppliers are much mature than the second, third-tier suppliers.
That's a great point. Thank you. Any questions on that? No. Okay, so this survey was done by a group called TPI, and it really, it's kind of a general survey again. The first was kind of China as it stands alone. And this is in comparative. In this case, it's against India and the Philippines. And it's kind of a red, yellow, green analogy. And there were a number of categories that they evaluated in which China scores fairly well, right? So regional presence and language, China scores very well. I think we traditionally in the U.S. think of English skill as being the only language necessary for an outsourcing group, but however, there's a significant presence of German, Russian, Japanese-speaking folks in China as well. So fare really well in language and things like that. In terms of labor arbitrage and the cost against India and the Philippines, India actually scores higher. And I think one of the ways that we've combated kind of the wage inflation within China is by looking at what are considered tier 2 and tier 3 cities in China. So the tier 1s being the larger cities like Shanghai and Beijing, which we're very familiar with, but there are tier 2 cities just outside those cities which are also very large. So for example, just outside of Shanghai there's a city called Wuxi, and many of us may not have heard of it, but there's 12 million people in Wuxi, so it's a very solid tier 2 source, and so on and so forth. In terms of geopolitical risk, China, very, very stable. John can tell you more about the government than I can, so I'm not even going to go there. But as far as business continuity planning and things of that nature, it scores really high. Political stability, no major changes or unrest, things of that nature. That's all I have there. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
Yeah, I just want to say this is TPI is a major market research company, U.S.-based, I believe. They're part of the TPG Group, which is a major investment group. So it's not something that favor China. So this study is done, I think, in 2010. So some of the information may be a little bit dated, but overall, I think it's a pretty good assessment of China. But of course, if you look at China, the different people have different ideas. But hopefully, what we're presenting here give you a more comprehensive picture. There are a lot of factors they evaluated.
And then one more slide in terms of the perspective, India, China, Philippines. Financial and regulatory environment. So everyone scores fairly well on cost advantage. That's pretty straightforward. Inflation, as of late, China inflation is becoming somewhat more prevalent, but still fares pretty well. You can see data security got a red mark in China, and that's something that hits the press and we all talk about. And I think John really hit it on the head. What's really most important is picking the right partner. There are a number of companies in China that are extremely reputable. They're on stock exchanges. They're global companies. Whether it's an India-based company that's in China, who's very prevalent, or a company like iSoftStone, there are a number of providers who are very reputable in China and take those extra measures for data security. So picking the right partner is critical there. China also scores very well in the overall workforce, not only capacity, but management ability, quality of labor pool, number of graduates, things like that. And then in terms of business environment, the first topic being service maturity. We talked about coming up the scale in terms of maturing the offerings, and China got a yellow there. Very high in infrastructure. The technology and physical parks within the major cities in China are pretty impressive. And you can see everyone got a big red mark for time zone alignment. So that's what kind of the local groups will help you do, is kind of manage the time zone differences.
Yeah. Any questions?
So for my piece, in closing, here are what I think the key success factors in working with a China-based outsourcing company. The first, and we see it with all the multinational companies that we work with, is a clear China strategy. And what's interesting is our client strategies are maturing as well, right? As the market's maturing in China, our clients are maturing in terms of how they think about China. My job in the US is to work with companies, multinational companies, that are already doing business with in China, but also do business with them here. And I can give you a number of examples, that I'm willing to do offline. But essentially, they've established an Asia presence. They've started to do business in Asia. And they just did it, maybe as a pilot or as an experiment. And they're maturing their thoughts in terms of how they actually go about conducting business. So they all have a reason to want to go there. It could be the talent pool. It could be access to the market, things of that nature. But they don't have all the questions answered. So they're just going there, right? So have a strategy, understand what's bringing you there, and then try to execute on that strategy. That's number one. Number two, we've all been around IT long enough to know how to manage outsourcing and what it takes to implement a successful program. Project program management, what methodologies, things of that nature. I think those disciplines very much lend themselves to what you'll be dealing with in China. And as I mentioned earlier, the right partner in China is going to be key to that execution. There has to be a synergy. There has to be, that desire to succeed as a team, because it really is a partnership. Once you start performing, IT services and working kind of as one team in concert, you have joint goals, and you need to be in lockstep with your partner. I think there's also a note there: build a leadership team with China expertise. That can also be key if there are any language barriers, things of that nature. And then select the right projects. Understand what your partner can provide you and how they score in those areas, and then pick the projects that really fit that profile. Some of the clients that we work with are very mature in their thinking about how they do that. They'll pick projects with certain technologies because their partner might be strong in that technology, or certain methodologies for that same reason. But the idea is to profile the type of work that you want to do, and then score your projects to see what would apply itself best to the China market.
Yeah, I would like to just add a few things on the China strategy, why that is important. I think because China in a maturity curve is not as mature as IBM or Infosys. So if you're purely looking at outsourcing, China won't be there for you. So, compare apple to apple, none of the Chinese companies can compare to IBM. None of them can compare to Infosys. There are, big gaps still. In terms of their, expertise in a particular industry, in terms of their presence, global support capability. I think so. That's why you really need to know why you want to use China. You need to have a strategy. Many of our customers, have that in mind, and they have been very successful in China. I can just give you a few examples, like UBS. They have a very strong Indian support as providers. They use all the global providers. But when they come to China for their investment operation, they believe a local Chinese company is the way to go because they are developing, growing their Chinese market. And Indian companies cannot support them fully in that growth. So they selected, Chinese companies, and we're lucky to be the one. And so we grow together. Now we become a very successful operation there. Have 200 people, supporting their middle office investment operation, very sophisticated, type of BPO operation. But without that China strategy, UBS won't do this. They will just go easily with the Wipro, Infosys, say you set it up for me. So that's why the China strategy is critical for you to be successful in China.
Great. A couple slides about iSoftStone. We're good.
Yeah, just quickly give you an overview of our company. We started 10 years ago, 2001, and with about 40 people. And today we have around 13,000 people. We have been growing, pretty fast. And I mentioned before we're listed in New York Stock Exchange, in 2010. And the key industries we focus on are technology, communication, banking and financial services, as well as energy transportation. And the service we provide are broadly consulting and solutions in the ITO and BPO. But majority of our business are in the ITO space. We have probably around 65% of our business are in the ITO, software development, application development, application testing, maintenance, that type of services. And we also have a large number of global customer, 85 global companies, and 57 of them are international companies, and 25 are domestic Chinese companies. And so our business is pretty balanced between international and China. And it's about 60% are Chinese business, local, and 40% are international business. So we're playing in both markets. And this is just a quick view of our customer base. As you can see, some well-known names, U.S. companies, European companies, and some are major Chinese companies. So this is our presentation. Like to get questions and some discussions. Any comments you have or experience you can share?
Yeah. I guess I just have a general question on the smaller engagements. My experience has been, in addition to the reputation of the company, it also depends on the training, the education of the people who obviously are working for the outsourcer. And having worked in India, you fairly quickly know which universities, which colleges are turning out the best IT people. And you can sort of guess what's going on and what kind of engagement you're going to have. In China, I find it very difficult, at least trying to start out, understanding the educational system in terms of how it's providing the training to people. How do you assess in China, how would somebody who's going to hire you, for example, assess the skills of the people that are brought to the engagement based on many different ways in which people can be trained, state schools, universities, technical schools, et cetera, et cetera. I'm really asking, is there a fairly quick way to find out how you would rank some of these schools in terms of their ability to teach skills, IT skills to people?
Yeah, there are, I think, rankings among all the universities in China. China's Harvard, there's China's MIT. So there are two schools that are well known. They're really equivalent to the two schools here in the U.S. So the Tsinghua University is China's MIT. So that produces top quality engineers. Then there are a number of universities that are known for producing high quality engineers. And I think that the information is publicly available. And you can work with either a local partner like iSoftStone. We can tell you all the rankings, which universities give you better engineering graduates, or you can work with the government agencies. They can provide that information. And there are also, in addition to the universities, there are software colleges that are focusing on the software engineering training, education. So it's also a degree program. There are 35 university that have software colleges. So they produce specifically for this industry, IT professionals. So there are, I think, information available for you to make your selection. And then there are a number of training programs. For example, we work with Carnegie. We work with Carnegie Mellon. We have a training institute that are specifically designed for training IT professionals. We also work with the universities, embedded our courses into the university program, curriculum to train the IT people.
My question is a bit away from the Fortune 500 company scenarios. So for the past few years, I was helping the boutique US consulting firm, launching our own office in Shanghai. And I'm also running a startup in the China direction. For a smaller early stage company or even a startup, who's also in need of an IT solution, what kind of direction do you recommend, for that kind of early stage company to look for in terms of IT partner, IT solution? Like, what kind of resources would be the best to start with?
To support, basically, your question is what kind of partners you should look for to support early stage companies, technical needs of early stage companies. I would say if the early stage companies are international, so for example, are US companies, then your better choice are to work with the leading service providers in China, the big providers in China, because they have international experience. I think the key is really, the people who are supporting you understand your, culture and your needs. And if you're a local Chinese startup, then you can select the second, third tier companies that are less expensive, but they're local. They understand your needs there locally. And but for the international companies, even if you're small, you still can work with the leading companies in China. They are at this stage don't really pick the projects that are large or small. They're really picking on whether it's a long-term relationship or short-term relationship. So that's the key selection criteria. So I think what you need is really the experience to work with the international companies. So those are the companies that the leading companies will have these type of experience, but not the second, third tier companies. Nicer. So.
I also have a question. As an outsourcing company, I think you have a lot of challenge when you want to outsource support West country. As a company, how do you think this advantage and disadvantage you have, and how do you handle this? This is one question. Another question is, you mentioned that you create a company 2 years ago. I think the technology doesn't change a lot from computer compared to 10 years ago to now. So as an IT company, how can you catch all this trend about this knowledge?
Okay, let me just repeat your question. The first question is how the Chinese companies can overcome the challenges to support the international customers because of the cultural differences, some language issues, and so on. What we do to overcome that, is that fair? Okay. Yeah, that's I think we're going through a maturity curve. This experience has been accumulated. We also have developing our international presence. For example, we have our teams here in U.S. who are experienced with the culture. They will work with the team offshore in China, together to support our international customer base. So that's, also we have trainings in China to, really train our people, on how to work with the Western customers. There are, cultural trainings, there are language trainings, and also we provide similar trainings actually to our customer base. It's both sides, need to understand the culture, cultural differences. And we're running the Chinese cultural training in our Western customer offices, really to tell their people how the best to work with the Chinese engineers. So it's both ways, but there are a lot of training are going on, and also we have local resources to support this. And your second question, let me just try to repeat, is the technologies have been developing very fast, and how the providers can, catch up the technical trend, really, in order to effectively support a customer base. Is that okay? Yeah, this is actually what a lot of companies are doing in China. Actually, we think this is the new technologies are better opportunities for us because it's new to everybody. So China is also known as Chinese engineers are very fast learners. They learn the new technology very fast, and the new technologies also put us on the same starting line with our international competitors. So we make investment into these new technologies to really try to grasp them as fast as possible. For example, the cloud computing technology we have teams that are really in the forefront of that technology. We work with IBM, we work with the EMC, those are the leaders in this space. So we're partnering with them. We can, really get the, best technologies, really fast. So there are many different ways we are, but we believe this is a good opportunity for us to be more competitive.